Hey guys, tonight we slip back thousands of years into a world where your ancestors are standing ankle-deep in dust, staring at a glowing fire pit and clutching something that looks suspiciously like a lumpy, dark, heavy brick. Don't worry, this ancient loaf won't bite. But if you took a chunk right now, you'd probably chip a tooth, sprain a jaw, or just instantly realize that your modern stomach has become a delicate little marshmallow compared to theirs. And honestly, you probably won't survive this, at least not without a probiotic sponsorship. The air smells like smoke and wild grass. Someone nearby is grinding seeds between two stones with the determination of a person who knows winter is always one bad storm away. The scene is raw, gritty, and incredibly human. And now, because your brain somehow decided this was a good time to explore history, here you are, watching the earliest super bread come into existence. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch near the fire with your ancestors, watching them mash grains, gritty, rich, unrefined things pulled straight from the earth. These aren't the soft, obedient wheat kernels you see in modern bread commercials. These are wild, unpredictable seeds that require effort, patience, and upper body strength you definitely don't have. Historians still argue whether early humans discovered bread by accident, maybe some pasty mash dropped on a hot rock, or through long, deliberate experimentation. But whichever version you pick, one thing feels clear. This was super bread, and your body today could barely handle a bite. The grains they're using are nothing like what ends up in today's sliced sandwich loaf. Your ancestors crushed einkorn and emmer, ancient grains packed so tightly with nutrients you could practically build a small hut out of them. And honestly, the bread sometimes had more rocks than flavor, because stone grinding often left tiny mineral bits behind. That meant your ancestors got a free multivitamin every time they ate. You'd be texting your dentist. As you watch the mixture come together, you notice something quirky. Their dough is alive. Not metaphorically, like, wow, so poetic, but actually alive with wild yeast floating through the air, drifting down like invisible confetti. Early humans didn't know what yeast was, but they figured out something magical. Leave the grain mush out long enough, and it bubbles, rises, and suddenly becomes easier to digest. Think of it like leaving kombucha on the counter too long, except the end result is edible and won't explode. The fire crackles. Someone stretches the dough into rough shapes, slaps them onto a hot stone and steps back as steam rises. The smell is earthy and almost sweet. You watch the loaf puff slightly, even without the precision of modern ovens. Your ancestors grin. They've done this before. Bread isn't just food, it's survival tech. It keeps for days, sometimes weeks. It can be carried, traded, guarded like treasure, and in many places, it becomes the foundation of civilization itself. Mainstream archaeological fact time. The earliest known bread remnants discovered in Jordan date back around 14,000 years, long before farming even existed. That means humans were baking bread before they were growing the plants used to make it. Imagine the chaos. You're baking things from ingredients you don't even cultivate yet. It's like making lasagna before inventing pasta. But here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some researchers believe early grains were sometimes mixed with crushed roots or even wild tubers that acted like natural thickeners. One theory even suggests certain plants might have added a mild mood-altering effect. Nothing dangerous, but just enough to make the bread feel warm and friendly. Basically prehistoric comfort food. As the loaf cooks, you notice something about your ancestors that feels both inspiring and slightly guilt-inducing. Their guts are absolute champions. They could break down hard fibers, wild starches, and mysterious microbes with digestive ease. Meanwhile, your modern gut throws a tantrum if you drink coffee before eating breakfast. You tear off a small piece of the finished super bread, not with your hands because this thing is hot and feels like it was fired from a catapult, but you watch one of your ancestors do it. The texture is dense, chewy, complex. Your ancestors chew slowly, jaws working like well-oiled machines. This isn't a soft supermarket loaf. This is bread that fights back, and yet, it nourishes them. Every bite packs minerals, fiber, protein, natural oils, and wild microbial life that modern bread processing has nearly erased. Ancient bread was practically a survival multivitamin. Today's bread is sometimes little more than fluffy glucose wearing a trench coat. You glance around and realize something else. Bread here is communal. Everyone participates, gathering grains, grinding them, kneading dough, tending fires. In a world without fast food apps, this is the closest thing to a family dinner ritual. Bread isn't background food, it's the center of life. There's a quiet moment where someone offers you a fresh piece. You hesitate. Your ancestors look amused. This is everyday stuff to them. To you, it's an extreme sport, but you take a bite anyway. It tastes hearty, almost smoky, with hints of the grasses it came from. It's not yum bakery treat. It's, wow, this could keep me alive through an ice age. As the fire dimly glows, you realize the truth. Your modern loaf isn't just different from this super bread. It's practically a distant cousin with an overly processed glow-up. Over time, convenience replaced nutrition, speed replaced patience, and softness replaced strength. But for now, here in the flickering firelight, you get a glimpse of what bread used to be before civilization sanded off all its rugged edges. You wake the next morning to the soft rustle of grass and the low murmur of people gathering scattered seeds from the ground. You stretch, well, you try to stretch, and realize your back is not built for sleeping on prehistoric dirt. Your ancestors, meanwhile, stand up like they're made of flexible tree bark. They don't even crack their necks. Show-offs. Today, you follow them across a wide meadow where sunlight glints off patches of wild grain. Thin stalks swaying like tiny golden flags. These aren't neat rows of farm fields. They're chaotic seas of whatever nature decided to plant this season. Your ancestors move through them with practiced ease, plucking clusters, shaking seeds loose, humming quietly. You join in, though your gathering method is more enthusiastic toddler than skilled forager. Historians still argue whether ancient foragers recognized the full potential of these grains right away, or whether they simply thought, hey, these tiny things don't run away, we should eat more of them. What's clear is that wild grains became one of humanity's earliest power-ups. They offered carbs, protein, minerals, and long-lasting energy. Basically, ancient trail mix, but without the chocolate chips or bad decisions. You scoop a handful of raw kernels into your palm. They're hard, small, and slightly bitter. Definitely not something you'd snack on while watching Netflix. But your ancestors know exactly how to turn them into food, and more importantly, how to store them. Grain that falls to the ground can be gathered. Grain that dries in the sun can be kept. Grain that's dropped into a fire accidentally becomes popcorn, which shockingly is a real thing. Some archaeologists believe early humans may have discovered rudimentary popped grains long before organized cooking techniques existed. Imagine being the first person to see a seed explode and thinking, yes, I will eat that. As you walk, the wind carries the smell of dry earth and warm grass. It's peaceful, almost hypnotic. You start to understand why grains became such a big deal. They're dependable. Animals migrate, berries rot, but grains, they wait for you. Sort of like that one friend who always texts, "Are you on your way?" even though they know you definitely are not. Your ancestors kneel to demonstrate proper harvesting. They pinch the stalk just below the seed head, twist, and gently shake until the grains fall into a small woven pouch. You try it. Half the seeds fall into your hand, the other half scatter into your shoes. One of your ancestors raises an eyebrow, unsure whether you need help or just more childhood development. A little later, the group rests beneath a small tree. Someone hands you a pouch of what looks like primitive granola. Wild grains mixed with crushed nuts and dried berries. It's chewy, slightly bitter, and somehow incredibly energizing. This is what life tasted like before sugar addiction became a cultural hobby. Here's your mainstream historical fact for today. Wild einkorn, one of the world's earliest grains, has been found in archaeological sites dating back over 30,000 years, suggesting humans gathered and consumed these grains long before forming villages. That means you're watching a food tradition older than the concept of history itself. But there's also a quirky tidbit. Some researchers believe early humans sometimes added ash to their grain mixtures, not by accident but intentionally. A sprinkle of fine ash may have improved mineral content and helped digestion. Congratulations, Your ancestors invented the first questionable health supplement. You continue walking with your group, the terrain shifting from open meadow to rocky hill paths. As you climb, you realize how physically demanding this lifestyle is. Every meal is earned. Every bite is a reward. You look at the grains you've gathered and try to imagine them becoming bread. There's no neat milling, no temperature-controlled ovens, no Instagrammable sourdough hydration ratios. Everything depends on the environment, the weather, and a kind of instinct modern humans rarely tap into unless their Wi-Fi goes down. Your ancestors stop at a small flat clearing, perfect for sorting harvested seeds. They sit in a circle and pour their gathered grains into shallow baskets, sifting out debris. You mimic them, though you also manage to accidentally fling half of yours directly into the wind. One ancestor pats your shoulder, the universal sign for, "I'm being polite, but please never do that again." As they work, you notice something fascinating. Early foragers didn't just take grains, they managed landscapes. Over generations, they returned to the same patches, harvesting at the right time, trampling competing plants, and unintentionally encouraging grain growth. This is proto-agriculture. Tiny hints of farming long before anyone would build a village or invent a hoe. Historians still debate whether this land-shaping behavior counts as pre-farming, but you can see how easily it might lead there. You chew another mouthful of the primitive granola and imagine explaining to your ancestors that one day people would invent gluten-free, grain-free, carb-free bread made out of clouds, almond dust, resentment. They would stare at you, blink slowly, and probably assume you've eaten a cursed berry. By afternoon, the group heads back toward the camp, carrying pouches filled with seeds that will later become dough. The sun hangs low, the grass brushes your legs. You're tired in a way that feels oddly satisfying, like you're plugged into an ancient routine humans followed for, thousands of years before modern comforts softened your edges. Back at camp, kids run around holding stalks like tiny wheat wands. Someone is already preparing a grinding stone. Another person sorts berries to mix into a later meal. Life revolves around food not as a craving but a responsibility. You sit beside the pile of grain you gathered, your contribution small but real, and for a moment you feel woven into the rhythm of this ancient world. Each seed matters. Each handful feeds someone. Each failure teaches you something. And this wild grain, this tough stubborn plant growing freely across the land, is about to become the foundation of everything from villages to cities to the bread aisles at your local grocery store. Your ancestors don't know it yet, but these scattered seeds are steering humanity toward agriculture, civilization, and eventually overpriced avocado toast. As night falls, you watch them begin to grind the wild kernels into coarse flour, and you start to recognize the earlier steps of bread making, not as a recipe, but as a relationship between people and the land. You wake again to the rhythmic scrape of stone against stone, a sound so steady it almost becomes part of the air you're breathing. The sun's barely over the horizon, but your ancestors are already at work, crouched beside flat grinding slabs, leaning their full weight into the motion. You shuffle over, half awake, fully unprepared, and watch coarse flour collect in small uneven piles. It smells warm, earthy, and somehow alive, like the promise of food hidden inside dust. Today you're about to witness an accident so world-changing that it might be the only kitchen mistake in history that deserves a standing ovation. Because right now, as they grind and mix yesterday's gathered grains with water, something unexpected is happening on the edge of the bowl, a faint bubble, then another. The mixture sighs, shifts, loosens. It's subtle, like the dough is waking up before you do. You lean in, blinking, wondering if tiny bread ghosts have moved in overnight. You point. Your ancestors shrug. They've seen this before. Sometimes the grain paste just changes. Historians still argue whether early humans stumbled into fermentation by chance, maybe leaving dough out too long, maybe forgetting it in a warm spot. But whatever the origin, this bubbling is the birth of bread as a living companion. This is the moment dough becomes something more than mashed plants. It becomes an ecosystem. Someone stirs the mixture with a wooden stick. It resists slightly, stretching like it has opinions now. You smirk. Great. Even ancient bread is more assertive than you before coffee. The dough isn't smooth or pretty. It's lumpy, sticky, wobbly, and somehow charming, like a prehistoric pet that requires feeding instead of walking. Your ancestors don't fully understand the chemistry, but they understand the results. Bubbly dough bakes differently. It becomes lighter, tastier, easier to chew. More importantly, easier to digest. Ancient fermentation was humanity's first digestive hack, the OG probiotic. Meanwhile, your modern gut complains when you eat something after 10 p.m. You dip your fingers into the bowl, your ancestors nod permission, and the dough clings with surprising elasticity. Wild yeasts drifting on the wind have colonized it, feasting on sugars, producing gases, transforming simple mash into rising magic. It's like watching evolution happen in fast forward but with a much better smell. Here's your historical fact for the section. The oldest evidence of controlled fermentation appears alongside early farming settlements around 10,000 years ago, suggesting humans quickly realized fermented grains lasted longer and were kinder on the stomach. Fermentation wasn't just a culinary discovery, it was survival insurance. But here's a fringe tidbit that makes you grin. Some early communities believed bubbling dough was inhabited by friendly spirits, tiny guardians ensuring the bread rose properly. This wasn't fear, it was appreciation. Bread wasn't merely food, it was a partner in survival. Honestly, compared to your modern bread that expires suspiciously slowly, believing in bread spirits feels kind of wholesome. As the dough continues its quiet transformation, your ancestors fetch more bowls, clay ones, roughly shaped, still bearing fingerprints from whoever molded them. One is filled with slightly sour-smelling leftover dough from the day before. Ah, there it is. The world's first sourdough starter casually lounging like an immortal kitchen grandparent. They mix a bit of the old batch into the new one. Instantly the mixture becomes more active, like the yeasts woke up and started cheering. You can almost hear them chanting, "We're back, baby!" You laugh. Your ancestors don't get the reference, but they appreciate your enthusiasm. As they work, they talk quietly. Bread making isn't just a task, it's a rhythm, a gathering point, a shared ritual. Kids wander over, poking the dough before running off. Elders sit nearby, offering small adjustments. More water, more flour, a warmer spot near the fire. There's wisdom in every gesture. The fire pit is already heating up. Flat stones ring the edges, warming slowly. You realize early ovens were sometimes nothing more than heated rocks or hollowed earth pits where bread could rest and bake. Primitive, yes, but effective. Kind of like using a toaster by throwing it into a campfire and hoping for the best. Your ancestors prepare several dough shapes. Thick patties for quick meals, small rounded lumps for travel, and a larger, precious piece reserved for something that feels almost ceremonial. You can sense it. This isn't just cooking. This is cultural glue. You lean back, absorbing the atmosphere. The morning chill fades as the fire breathes heat into the camp. The sky brightens from pale gold to soft blue. You feel content, calm, like your body recognizes this ancient routine even if your modern brain is still buffering. Someone signals you over to watch a new step, resting the dough. They place it in a warm corner near the fire, cover it with woven reeds, and, this part surprises you, leave it alone. Just wait. Something you, a modern human, have almost forgotten how to do without checking your phone 47 times. Time passes. The dough expands, rising softly. Your ancestors grin with satisfaction. You grin too. Look at you, appreciating yeast like it's quality entertainment. They bring over the flat stones, brushing ash aside. The dough is flattened, shaped, and gently laid onto the heated surfaces. The sound is soft, a faint hiss, a whisper of steam. The smell? Heavenly, warm, tangy, rich. You inhale deeply and instantly understand why bread became emotional support food long before the phrase existed. A small loaf is pulled from the fire, its crust crackled, center tender. You break it open, steam curls upward. You take a bite. It's sour, chewy, and layered with flavors that feel ancient, alive, familiar. Not like modern bread, which often tastes like fluffy nostalgia with preservatives. This tastes like history melting on your tongue. As you chew, someone hands you the leftover starter. You cradle it carefully, feeling its quiet warmth. It smells sharp, comforting. This little blob will be tomorrow's bread, and maybe next week's, maybe next month's. In some cultures, sourdough starters were passed down for generations. Food heritage in microbial form. You sit there, starter in your hands, realizing ancient humans didn't just discover fermentation by accident. They built relationships with dough, with yeast, with time itself. And that relationship changed everything. Nutrition, culture, even community structure. And it all started with a bowl that was accidentally left out too long. You're up before the sun again. Well, technically your ancestors are up before the sun, and you're doing your best impression of a sleepy house cat dragged into productivity. The sky is still a muted grey as you follow them to a familiar place, the grinding area. But today something is different. Instead of the smaller handstones, they're hauling over massive flat slabs, broad, heavy platforms carved smooth by years of use. These are the engines of ancient cuisine, the prehistoric equivalent of high-performance kitchen appliances, just without buttons, electricity, or warranty support. The moment the first grains hit the surface, you understand why stone-ground flour was a superpower. The sound is low and grainy, almost soothing, like the world's earliest ASMR track. Your ancestors push a heavy top stone across the bottom slab, crushing kernels with slow, deliberate force. You watch the grains break open, releasing oils and scents you've never associated with flour before. Nutty, grassy, strangely rich. Modern flour doesn't smell like this. Modern flour smells beige. Historians still argue whether early stone grinding was invented for efficiency or out of necessity, whether humans wanted finer flour or simply needed a sturdier way to process tough wild grains. What no one debates is the outcome. Stone-ground flour kept its germ, its bran, its minerals. Nothing was sifted out, nothing removed. It was flour in all its rugged glory, packed with iron, magnesium, fiber, and natural oils. Basically, your ancestors were eating multigrain, nutrient bomb bread before the concept of fortified existed. You reach out to touch the freshly milled flour. It's coarse, almost sandy but warm from friction. Tiny flecks of bran catch the light. You rub some between your fingers and immediately cough. Apparently flour dust is timelessly aggressive. A child nearby giggles at your reaction. They've grown up around this process. You're the weird future visitor who can't handle flour to the face. Fair. As the grinding continues, the stones collect microscopic fragments of dust. Yes, actual stone dust, which ends up in the flour. And here's the wild part. That dust added minerals to the bread. Calcium, silica, iron, accidental supplements. Your ancestors' teeth and bones got a subtle boost because they were literally eating tiny bits of rock. Meanwhile, you avoid crunchy cookies because they feel sharp. Someone nudges you toward another group working with different stones. Bigger, newer ones. They're shaping tools, adjusting grooves, improving grinding surfaces. You realize these stones weren't just picked up. They were engineered. Early humans experimented with textures, angles, and weights to optimize grinding. This wasn't primitive, this was early culinary tech. A mainstream fact for this section. The earliest known saddle querns, those two stone grinding systems you're staring at, date back more than 9,000 years, found across regions from the Near East to Europe. These tools mark a major shift in human diet and workload, especially for women, who often carried the grinding responsibility. Hours every day. You try pushing the stone yourself and suddenly feel a deep respect for ancient women the way you respect Olympic athletes. Now for your quirky tidbit. Some archaeological sites show microscopic traces of unexpected things in the flour, like wildflowers, bits of herbs, and even curious pollen signatures. It's entirely possible that ancient bread sometimes tasted vaguely like a meadow. Unintentionally floral artisanal loaves. Take that. Modern bakeries charging $12 for lavender sourdough. After a while, the grinding area becomes lively, almost musical. The scrape of stones overlaps with conversation, laughter, the occasional sneeze, flour dust again. You catch yourself relaxing into the rhythm. There's something grounding, literally, about watching food come from material effort instead of machines. Everything is physical, earned, honest. An elder taps your shoulder and shows you how to adjust your stance. Knees bent, arms steady, motion smooth, not too fast, not too slow. You give it another try, and this time the stone moves with more control. Sure, it still feels like you're pushing a boulder uphill, but you're doing it with intention. Your ancestors gather the flour into woven baskets, mixing batches from different grains. They aren't just grinding, they're creating blends. Some flours are darker, richer, some are light and grassy. They mix based on season, storage, even mood. Bread here isn't standardized, it's expressive. Every loaf tells a story of place and time. Compare that to modern bread, which mostly tells the story of whatever was cheapest to make in bulk. Once a sizable heap of flour is ready, someone calls everyone toward the central area. It's time to bake again. But today, the dough feels different in your hands. Heavier, grittier, textured like a promise. You knead it, and the small mineral grains scratch lightly against your palms, grounding you in ways soft white flour never could. Historians still argue whether ancient bread was more nutritious because of the grains themselves or because of the slower processing, you murmur to yourself as you fold the dough. But watching the process unfold, no rush, no shortcuts, it's hard not to believe the magic was in the method. The fire is roaring now, hotter than yesterday, stones glowing faintly. Your ancestors flatten some dough into discs, shape others into thick rolls. One person even pokes decorative patterns with a stick, artistry emerging before written language. Humans have always wanted their food to look good, apparently. You help place the dough on heated stones. Steam rises instantly. The scent is deep, toasted, primal. It fills the air, settles into your clothes, into your lungs, into something softer, memory. Even if this is older than any civilization, something about bread baking just feels like home. The first loaf comes off the stone, dark, dense, speckled with grain and mineral. You break into it and find the inside moist but structured, like edible architecture. You take a bite. It's hearty, chewy, slightly sweet with natural grain oils. Your jaw works harder than it has in years. One of your ancestors laughs good-naturedly. You're chewing like someone who's forgotten bread once required effort. And as you eat, a realization settles over you. Stone-ground bread didn't just nourish bodies. It shaped jawlines, bone density, social routines, daily schedules. It influenced human evolution so profoundly that modern scientists can identify the shift in skull structure once milling became widespread. You swallow another bite and think, this isn't just bread. This is geology, biology, culture, and survival mashed into a single experience. Your ancestors reach for the next loaf, you do too, and this time, you're ready. You're kneeling beside the fire again, but today your attention keeps drifting back to yesterday's loaves, the dense, hearty slabs that required more jaw stamina than any modern sandwich. As you rub the lingering flour dust from your hands, you notice something subtle about the dough your ancestors are mixing this morning. It stretches, gently, slowly, like it has a secret life. You lean closer, squinting at the sticky strand between your fingers. Ah, you whisper. Gluten. The plot thickens. Or, well, the dough thickens. Your ancestors don't know the word. They just know this dough behaves better than the flat, gritty mixtures of long ago. It rises more, it bakes softer, it lasts longer. And unlike modern dough, which is often shoved through an industrial timeline so fast it barely has time to blink, this ancient mixture is given the one ingredient modern life keeps forgetting: time. Historians still argue whether gluten-heavy wheat spread primarily because it tasted better, stored longer, or simply bullied every other crop into submission. But here, kneeling in the dirt, watching hands knead with patient rhythm, you see the truth. Gluten was once a friend, a collaborator, a helpful network of proteins that made bread more portable, more stable, more alive. Your ancestors scoop up some dough and stretch it between their fingers, nodding with approval. The gluten strands form delicate webs, tiny structures built by long fermentation and gentle handling. Nothing is rushed, nothing is forced. It's the opposite of modern life, where even your bread sometimes feels like it's under a tight deadline. You poke the dough again, fascinated. It springs back, slowly, like a sleepy animal getting comfortable. But here's a joke your ancestors wouldn't get. If modern bread dough behaved like this, unrushed, fermented, tangy, half of today's bakeries would file missing person reports for their timelines. A mainstream, historical fact slides into your thoughts. Early wheat varieties like Einkorn and Emmer had significantly lower gluten content than the high-yield, high-protein strains used today. Not because gluten was evil, but because ancient people weren't trying to create giant, stretchy loaves. They just wanted nourishment, predictability, a food they could count on. But your ancestors had something modern bakers envy: fermentation time. Long, slow, wild fermentation that broke down gluten, softened fibers, and transformed tough grains into digestible magic. You watch as the dough from yesterday's starter begins to bubble and sour, coaxing enzymes to do their ancient work. Meanwhile, modern bread is often raced through a 2-hour process that leaves your gut whispering, "We were not built for this." Your quirky tidbit for the moment? Some ancient cultures believed that overly stretchy dough, seriously, meant the gods were pleased. A good gluten network was seen as a sign of cosmic favour, not gastrointestinal betrayal. Imagine explaining modern gluten-free diets to them. They would nod politely, and then assume you must have eaten a cursed mushroom. A young member of the group hands you a ball of dough and shows you how to fold it gently. Fold, rotate, fold, rest. It feels meditative, like bread therapy. The dough grows smoother under your palms, the gluten aligning into silky strands. You realize modern recipes still echo this technique, but they often skip the hours of rest that make it meaningful. Time passes. The dough puffs softly, rising not because of chemical shortcuts, but because it has been allowed to breathe, allowed to be dough, allowed to exist. You sit back, letting warmth from the fire soak into your bones. The air smells like tangy fermentation, toasted grain, and the faint sweetness of natural enzymes doing their job. It's alive, really alive, and your body reacts with a kind of deep recognition, like some ancient switch inside you flips back on. Your ancestors shaped the dough into round loaves, handling them with a tenderness you didn't expect. You see reverence in their gestures, respect. They aren't just making bread, they're continuing a lineage of nourishment passed down through countless generations. Bread is memory. Bread is science. Bread is myth. Bread is math before math existed. A loaf goes onto the hot stone surface, and you hear a faint sizzle as steam snakes upward. The crust begins to bloom with tiny cracks. The gluten tightens, then relaxes, then sets into place like a story coming full circle. You reach for a cooked piece from a smaller loaf and tear it open. The crumb stretches before giving way, forming long, delicate strands that glisten in the light. You bite in, and it's different from past loaves. Lighter, but still deeply textured. Soft, but not fluffy. Chewy in the best way. Taste layered with funk and earth and time. This bread doesn't fight your jaw. It works with you. It collaborates with your digestion. It's the kind of bread that sits comfortably in your stomach and says, "Hey buddy, I've already partially digested myself, just relax." Meanwhile, modern bread is often like a roommate who moves in, eats your snacks, and leaves your gut feeling betrayed. You take another bite and glance around the camp. Your ancestors are laughing, chewing, talking with mouths full because table manners are 10,000 years in the future. They're healthy, strong. Their guts are thriving ecosystems capable of digesting rugged fermented grains with the ease of a well-practiced orchestra. You swallow your final bite and feel something shift. A realization settling like warm bread in a firelit belly. Your ancestors didn't fear gluten. They tamed it. They partnered with it. They gave it time, microbes, fermentation, and patience. It was modern life that turned gluten into an adversary, not because the protein changed, but because everything around it did. You wipe flour from your hands, feeling strangely proud of the dough resting by the fire. And now you're starting to understand the true difference between super bread and the rushed, fluffy imposters lining today's store shelves. You're beginning to settle into this ancient rhythm now. The sounds, the scents, the unhurried pace of a world where nothing comes from a package and everything comes from patience. This morning, when your ancestors gather around the fire with bowls of bubbling dough, nobody is rushing. Nobody is glancing at a clock. Time moves differently here, and bread rises according to the universe's schedule, not a factory's. You watch the dough from yesterday, now fully alive. It has doubled in size, domed at the top, soft and airy beneath its thin skin. Touching it feels like pressing into a pillow made of warm clouds and quiet optimism. You poke it, gently this time, and it sighs downward before slowly lifting itself back up as if saying, "I got this." This is slow-rise bread. The kind your ancestors relied on, the kind your gut still remembers even if your grocery store has forgotten. A mainstream historical fact drifts in as the fire crackles. Ancient bread often fermented for 12 to 24 hours, sometimes even longer. That allowed enzymes and beneficial microbes to break down phytic acid, gluten, and tough plant fibers that would otherwise irritate your digestion. Long fermentation didn't just improve flavor, it fundamentally altered nutrition. Today, people wait 30 minutes for dough to rise and call it a miracle. Your ancestors would pat you on the head with sympathy. You help someone fold the dough again, stretch, fold, rotate, rest. The gluten realigns, air pockets redistribute. Something magical happens inside the dough during these long rest periods. You can feel its texture shift beneath your palms. Smoother, stronger, more cohesive. This isn't the quick-rise yeast explosion of modern loaves. This is dough slowly becoming its best self, like a character arc in a very patient movie. One of your ancestors lifts a piece of the dough and stretches it into a thin window pane. Light filters through it beautifully. They nod, satisfied. This loaf will nourish the whole group. But then a quirky detail reveals itself. One person prepares a smaller dough ball, not for eating but for healing. They press herbs into the sticky surface, shaping it into a poultice. Bread dough as medicine. Many ancient cultures used fermented dough to treat wounds, ease stomach issues, or soothe inflamed skin. It was their version of a spa day, except instead of cucumber masks, you had warm carbs slapped on your face. You chuckle imagining the world's first bakery meets hospital situation. Historians still argue whether long fermentation itself was discovered for flavor or for function, you murmur internally. But watching this, you can see both were impossible to separate. When survival depends on what you eat, flavor and function aren't two lanes, they're one road. Your ancestors move with deliberate calm as they shape the final dough into loaves. They score the tops with sharp stones, patterns that allow steam to escape and prevent unpredictable cracking. The designs look like early art, lines, crosses, spirals. Even now, bakers around the world mimic these patterns without realizing they're echoing movements older than civilization itself. As the dough rests, the entire group seems to pause with it. No one hurries, no one interrupts. The fire crackles in the background, and the sky warms into soft morning gold. You breathe deeper without meaning to. The pace of all this feels good. It feels right. Even your heartbeat seems to adjust, syncing with the slow rise of the bread. Finally, the stones near the fire are hot. Your ancestors gently lay the loaves on them. A soft hiss fills the air, a familiar sound now like ancient applause. You watch as the dough begins to lift, expand, crackle. The crust forms slowly, deepening to a rich brown. When they flip one loaf, the underside shows a beautiful mosaic of darker and lighter patches. You realize something. Slow rise equals strong bodies. This bread didn't spike blood sugar. It fed people steadily through long days of work. It didn't leave them sluggish. It fueled movement, endurance, resilience. Your ancestors weren't just surviving. They were thriving on this food. You take the first bite when a loaf is torn open. It's warm, tangy, soft inside, crispy outside. Layers of taste unfold gradually. Sourness from wild microbes, sweetness from natural grain oils, smokiness from the fire. Modern bread feels flat compared to this. Predictable, one-dimensional. This is bread with personality. And your gut? Oh, it loves this. Your stomach practically sighs, grateful for fiber, microbes, long-fermented proteins, and real nutrients. This is bread engineered by nature and time, not by speed or shelf life. Someone hands you a second piece, and as you chew, you observe how the meal becomes a social moment. People lean together, break bread together, strengthen trust together. There's no rush to finish, no need to check schedules. The world feels aligned around this food, the making of it, the sharing of it, the slow unfolding of a day shaped by nourishment instead of urgency. You watch an elder take a small scrap of dough and tuck it into a woven pouch. Tomorrow's starter, tomorrow's promise, tomorrow's energy, and you realize slow-rise bread didn't just make bodies stronger. It shaped the rhythms of life. Work began when dough finished rising. Travel happened after bread cooled. Communities formed around ovens and hearths. Time itself was measured in loaves. Meanwhile, modern bread is shaped by machines, deadlines, and preservatives. No wonder your gut sometimes feels confused. It misses the world where dough rose with the sun, not with a chemical leavening booster. You take another bite, slower this time, letting ancient flavors settle on your tongue. This is what bread was meant to be. The smell hits you before the meaning does. Smoky warmth, sweet grain, and a faint herbal undertone drifting on the morning air. You follow your ancestors toward a clearing you haven't seen before, where stones are arranged in a wide circle and the fire at the center burns lower, gentler, almost ceremonial. Today isn't just another baking day. Today, bread feels sacred. Your ancestors move with a quiet choreography. No rush, no chatter, just purposeful steps. Someone sprinkles flour around the hearth, drawing shapes in the dust. Another kneads dough with a deliberate, almost meditative rhythm. You sit down, cross-legged, unsure whether you've wandered into a kitchen, a temple, or both. And then it dawns on you. For early humans, there was no difference. Bread wasn't just food, it was ritual, identity, gratitude held together by gluten and hope. A mainstream historical fact rises in your mind like steam. In cultures from ancient Egypt to early Mesopotamia, bread offerings were placed in tombs, temples, and shrines. It symbolized life, rebirth, connection with the gods. It was the original spiritual multi-tool. Your ancestors aren't there yet, but they're already planting the seeds of this idea. They've learned that bread doesn't come easily. Grain must grow, weather must behave, fires must be tended, dough must be cared for. It makes sense that something requiring so much patience became intertwined with meaning. Someone hands you a small ball of dough. It's smooth, warm from hands that shaped it before yours. They gesture toward the fire, inviting you to join the quiet work. You hesitate, then begin forming the dough, feeling a surprising sense of responsibility. This loaf isn't just for eating, it's an offering. To luck, to the land, to the unseen forces that make survival possible. A quirky tidbit bubbles up. Some early groups believed bread captured the breath of the world, literally. Because dough rises with air and fermentation, they imagined each loaf carried a tiny piece of Earth's life force. The idea sounds mystical, but you can't deny the sensation of holding something alive as you knead. You shape your loaf into a small dome, and an elder scratches patterns into the surface with a twig, spirals, lines, dots, precursors of symbolic art. You smile. Humans have been decorating food long before latte art and bento boxes. Historians still argue whether these early markings were functional, steam vents, aesthetic, visual flair, or symbolic, messages for the spirits or future generations. Watching the elders' careful hands, you know the answer is probably all three. Humans rarely do anything for a single reason. You place your loaf on a warm stone near the fire. Instead of the usual quick sizzle, something quieter happens. The dough begins to rise slowly, gently, as if responding to the mood around it. The people gather in a semicircle, sitting silently. Someone hums a low, steady tone, a sound that feels like grounding more than music. Bread is becoming more than nourishment. It's becoming community glue. You look around and notice subtle differences. Today's flour blend includes crushed berries, dried herbs, and even a hint of something floral, pollen or petals mixed into the dough. Your ancestors saved special ingredients for ritual loaves. Suddenly you remember modern holiday breads, braids, sweet rolls, festive shapes. They're echoes of these ancient practices. You take a deep breath, letting the humid warmth of the baking area relax the tension in your shoulders. Watching the rising dough feels hypnotic. You imagine telling your ancestors that one day people would meditate by watching YouTube videos of bread rising. They would squint at you, confused, but maybe they'd understand the calming part. When the loaves are finished, your ancestors distribute pieces carefully, one to each person, even the little kids who are bouncing around with more energy than necessary. Everyone holds their portion like something fragile. You imitate them, cradling your piece as if it were a glowing ember, and then, in perfect unspoken coordination, everyone eats together. The bread is subtly sweet this time, with herbal notes that linger on your tongue. It tastes intentional, like a message written in flavor. It fills you differently too, not just physically, but emotionally. You exhale, realizing ancient rituals weren't superstition. They were structure, comfort, a way to create meaning in a chaotic world. One elder takes a final crumb of bread and crumbles it onto the ground. An offering. Thanks to the land. Thanks to the grain. Thanks to the mystery of fermentation that still feels like magic even though you've seen it happen in slow motion. A child mimics the gesture, scattering crumbs with pride. You can feel something shift inside you, understanding settling in. Bread wasn't just invented, it was honoured. It was woven into the rhythm of daily life and the shape of early belief systems. It guided decisions, seasons, celebrations. And as much as modern bread sits quietly in plastic bags on grocery shelves, it still carries faint echoes of this ancient reverence. You've simply forgotten to listen. You take one more bite, tasting tradition older than cities, and you realise your ancestors didn't just create super bread, they created meaning. You feel the world shifting beneath your feet, literally, as you walk along a packed dirt road that stretches toward a horizon buzzing with movement. Gone are the small family groups clustered around modest hearths. Now you're trailing behind an organised caravan of soldiers, traders, labourers and animals carrying bundles of food, tools and bread. So much bread. You are officially inside an early empire. The air hums with purpose. Dust rises with every step. And woven through the noise of boots, hooves and clattering gear is the unmistakable scent of travel bread. Dense, sour, long-lasting loaves built for endurance, not softness. If your ancestors' earlier breads were rugged pioneers, these are full-fledged marathon runners. Someone ahead of you tosses a loaf your way. You catch it and nearly drop it. This thing weighs as much as your sense of responsibility. You try not to show how much your wrists wobble. A mainstream historical fact clicks into focus. Roman soldiers were issued daily bread rations, often hard, coarse loaves baked in large communal ovens. Bread wasn't just a meal, it was infrastructure. Legions marched on it, empires expanded on it, armies fell without it. But before the Roman era fully forms around you, you're walking with an early imperial culture. Proto-empires, the kind that built trade networks long before city-states reached their prime. Everywhere, bread is the connective tissue that holds this sprawling machine together. You examine the loaf in your hands. The crust is thick enough to stop a small arrow. The inside is firm, chewy, deeply sour. Long fermentation kept it from spoiling during travel, and its sheer density meant a soldier could eat a slice and keep marching for hours. Slow energy. Real fuel. Compare that to modern white bread, which sometimes dissolves in your mouth like edible packing foam. You bite into the travel loaf. It crunches faintly, almost like biting into a history textbook. The tanginess is sharp, the texture resilient. A soldier beside you smirks when he sees your eyebrows jump. He slaps your back hard enough to rearrange a few vertebrae and mutters something you interpret as, "Good bread." You nod, because your pride can't take another hit today. As the caravan moves onward, you notice how bread shapes the logistics of empire. Massive clay ovens, portable, modular, sit on carts. Baking teams work at rest stops, kneading dough the way blacksmiths hammer metal, with strength and repetition. Grain stores are guarded like treasure, because they are treasure. Whoever controls the bread controls the march. A quirky tidbit sparks to life. In some ancient armies, bread wasn't just rations, it was a form of pay. Literally. Soldiers received portions of grain or loaves as wages. Bread as salary, bread as currency, the original paycheck sandwich. You hear the clatter of crates as workers unload more wheat from a river barge. Some grains spill into the water, where fish dart upward to investigate this sudden carb fest. The grain will be milled tonight, baked by dawn, packed by mid-morning, and eaten by soldiers by noon. The cycle never stops. Bread is the empire's heartbeat. Further down the road, you encounter traders travelling with sweetened breads, early luxury items meant for elites or ceremonies. Some loaves contain nuts, honey, dried fruit. These special breads travel across long trade routes, connecting distant regions through flavour and novelty. You take a small sample from a generous trader. It's rich, complex, and shockingly similar to holiday fruitcakes, except this one won't survive a century in a tin. As you continue, soldiers begin to joke and brag about whose hometown bakes the best bread. You smile. Bread competition predates bake-offs by thousands of years. Someone hands you another local loaf, lighter, airier, still tough enough to double as a weapon. You tuck it into your pack. Historians still argue whether empires expanded because of superior military technology or superior food logistics. But watching this moving bread factory disguised as a travelling army, you're convinced the answer is both. A hungry soldier fights poorly. A well-fed soldier becomes the engine of conquest. Suddenly the caravan halts. A general raises a hand. The group spreads out to rest, eat and regroup. Fires spark to life. Bags of dough appear. Bread making resumes instantly, as natural as breathing. You help a team knead dough, and they seem mildly amused at how slowly you work. Your hands ache, but the technique comforts you. Someone slices a freshly baked travel loaf with a bronze blade. The crumb is tight, the aroma sour and warm. You tear a piece, dip it into a stew made from lentils and herbs, and suddenly your taste buds applaud. This bread doesn't crumble, it anchors the meal. You wonder aloud how people today ended up with soft, cottony bread that collapses under the weight of a slice of tomato. A soldier raises an eyebrow, unsure what a tomato is. You wave it off. As the sun dips low, you sit on a smooth rock, chewing slowly. The crackle of fires blends with distant river sounds. Your body relaxes despite the noise and movement around you. You feel strangely safe inside this bread-powered machine. Night approaches and the camp settles. Some soldiers sleep with loaves tucked under their cloaks, protection against damp air and wandering thieves. Others gamble with dried bread chunks as makeshift dice. A few scatter crumbs on the ground as tiny offerings, echoing the rituals you witnessed earlier. Bread isn't just nutrition anymore, it's culture, currency, toolkit, identity. You lie down beside your pack, resting your head against a bag of grain. It's surprisingly comfortable, like a firm memory foam pillow designed by a blacksmith. As sleep drifts toward you, you realize something. Ancient bread wasn't meant to be soft. It was meant to sustain empires. And somehow, it still tastes better than most of the stuff in plastic bags today. Morning comes with a damp chill, the kind that settles into your sleeves and makes you wish someone had invented insulated jackets several millennia early. The caravan is gone now, faded into the tapestry of empire, but you find yourself walking into a much smaller, quieter world. A village, wooden fences, thatched roofs, mud paths worn by generations of feet, and at the centre of it all, bread. But not just one kind. This village is alive with variety. Loaves change with the seasons, with available grains, with shifting weather, with whatever the land decides to gift or withhold. Here, bread isn't standardized. It's moody, temperamental, seasonal, and your gut is about to take a tour through medieval digestive logic that your modern stomach might want to take notes on. You follow the scent of smoke to a low communal oven shaped like a giant clay beehive. A handful of villagers are already there, rolling dough balls, flattening patties, twisting strands into shapes that look festive, symbolic, maybe both. One woman hands you a small piece of dough to knead. It smells sour, nutty, and faintly herbal. Tonight's winter bread, she might be saying, if you spoke the language. But you understand the gesture. This bread exists because the season demands it. The grain changes depending on temperature, rainfall, storage conditions, and even the whims of rodents who definitely believe they own this village. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. In medieval Europe, different bread grades reflected class status. Fine white bread for the wealthy, darker rye, or barley loaves for the poor. But class aside, bread also shifted throughout the year. Wet seasons meant heavier, denser loaves. Dry seasons resulted in lighter, crumblier textures. Bread was a calendar you could eat. You watch a young boy stir ground rye into dough. Rye grows well in cold, damp soil. Perfect for this region. Wheat, too precious, too risky, too unpredictable. Rye may taste rustic, but your ancestors understood. Reliability, fluffiness. You bite a cooled loaf from an earlier batch. It's tangy, firm, slightly gummy in the centre. Your jaw braces itself, but your gut actually feels fine. Rye fermentation produces different acids and fibres than modern high-gluten wheat. This medieval loaf may not win beauty contests, but your microbiome does a little happy dance. Grateful for prebiotic fibres, modern bread often lacks. A quirky tidbit emerges as a villager pulls out a round loaf studded with seeds and, wait, beans. Yes, beans. Some medieval communities mixed legumes into their bread to stretch flour supplies and boost protein. Congratulations, you're witnessing the earliest version of the high-protein fitness bread influencers charge $14 a slice for. Kids gather as someone slices another loaf, this one coarse and dark, speckled with something. You lean in. Seeds, nuts, pebbles. No, really, tiny pebbles. You blink. Then remember, medieval mills often left bits of grit in flour. Dentists back then must have had job security. And then comes your scholarly debate moment. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers preferred their seasonal breads or simply tolerated them. Some evidence suggests people genuinely enjoyed the variations. Others suggest bread quality was a matter of survival roulette. Watching these villagers laugh, chat, and swipe crumbs from each other's sleeves, you suspect the answer lies somewhere in between. You wander toward a house where another baking operation is happening entirely differently. Here the dough is wetter, stickier. It's poured, not shaped, into wooden troughs lined with leaves. This bread will be steamed or slowly baked in the embers, coming out dense like early dumplings or thick pudding breads. Each household has its own technique. Bread diversity here makes your grocery bakery aisle look like a monochrome museum exhibit. One woman scoops a handful of dough from a clay jar resting near the hearth. It's greyish, bubbling, sour-smelling. You recognise it immediately, a starter. But this one is ancient, even by medieval standards. Passed down through generations, you touch it reverently. It smells like time itself, earthy, tangy, alive. As she folds the starter into fresh dough, she hums softly, the kind of tune that carries rhythm more than melody. You find yourself relaxing just listening to it. Medieval kitchens didn't just cook, they created soundscapes. Subtle ASMR before microphones existed. Someone offers you bread from a basket hanging near the ceiling, dried to near stone hardness. Travel bread, you think. Perfect for dunking in soups or for self-defense. You bite cautiously and nearly dislodge a tooth. A villager laughs, gestures for you to soak it in broth first. Ah, hydration, the ancient reboot function. You swirl the hard bread in a bowl of warm vegetable stew until it softens. Suddenly it transforms, spongy, rich, flavorful. This is the medieval version of bread bowls, and honestly, it slaps. Outside, the sky darkens as clouds roll in. Villagers hurry to cover their stored grains. Seasonal humidity can ruin crops, mold dough, or alter fermentation. Bread here isn't guaranteed. It's a constant negotiation with nature. You step back toward the communal oven. Loaves emerge steaming, cracked, smelling like earth after rain. You take one more piece. This one warm, aromatic, unexpectedly soft thanks to a long, slow rise. As you chew, you realize something profound. Bread wasn't just food in medieval villages, it was a daily experiment, an edible diary of weather patterns, harvest yields, cultural traditions, and microbial mysteries. Modern bread, predictable, controlled, shelved, plastic-wrapped. This bread, unpredictable, alive, honest. You look around the cozy, bustling village and take a deep breath, feeling your gut settle into the glow of ancient nourishment, and you know, you'll never look at a simple loaf the same way again. The medieval village fades like mist, and when your vision clears, you're standing somewhere louder, busier, and humming with a kind of restless energy. The air smells different too, less earthy, more metallic. You hear clanging, grinding, a rhythmic thunder that rattles through your ribs. You follow the sound until you see it, the mill. But not the stone querns you've grown attached to, no gentle scraping of saddle stones, no rhythmic back and forth of human hands. This mill is large, towering, mechanical in a way you haven't yet encountered on your bread journey. Water rushes down a chute, spinning a massive wheel. Wooden gears crank, metal components shudder, and inside the building lies the thing that will change bread forever. Steel rollers. You inhale sharply. You can already feel your gut whispering, "Oh no." A miller waves you inside. The air is thick with fine white dust. Not the nutty, textured flour you've been breathing for days, but something too light, too uniform. It hangs in the air like chalky fog. You cough once, twice, then stumble further in as your eyes adjust. And there, lined up like shiny industrial monsters, are the steel roller mills. A mainstream historical fact floats forward. In the 19th century, steel roller milling replaced traditional stone grinding across much of the world. The new machines shredded grain at high speed, separating the bran and germ, leaving behind pure endosperm, white flour that was cheap, soft, and heartbreakingly stripped of nutrients. You watch in slow motion as whole kernels pour into the rollers. The first pass cracks them, the next crushes them. Another separates the interior from the exterior. The bran flakes drift away like discarded wings. The germ, full of oils, vitamins, minerals, is whisked aside as undesirable. What remains is a pale, fine powder that looks clean but feels empty. The miller proudly scoops some into your hands. It glides between your fingers like silk. You can't deny the texture is beautiful, luxurious even. But you also know what's missing. All the fiber, all the minerals, all the natural oils, everything your ancestors depended on. You meet the miller's proud smile with a polite one. Very smooth, you say, trying not to sound judgy. But your gut crosses its arms. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Early roller-milled flour was so popular among wealthy households that some bakers advertised their bread as cloud soft or aristocratically white. People believed paleness meant purity, cleanliness, refinement. Never mind that the flour now lacked the nutrients once delivered accidentally through stone dust. Humanity exchanged wild strength for dainty fluffiness. You follow the flour stream as it flows into sacks. Workers move quickly, almost urgently. Speed is the new religion here. Where your ancestors waited hours or days for dough to ferment, these millers puff up with pride at how quickly they can produce massive bags of flour. You step back, noticing a line of people forming outside the mill. Bakers, merchants, families. Everyone wants this new flour. It's modern, it's convenient, it's fashionable. Historians still argue whether roller milling improved society by boosting food availability or harmed public health by stripping essential nutrients. Watching the bran and germ swept aside like crumbs on a table, you feel the answer brewing in your gut. A baker invites you to his shop nearby. You follow him through crowded streets to a warm, bustling bakery. Inside, workers knead dough so white it almost glows. They move with practiced efficiency, forming loaves stacked into perfectly identical rows. Everything is uniform, standardized, predictable. You sample a fresh loaf when it emerges from the oven. The crust is thin, the crumbs soft enough to pinch between two fingers. It collapses just a little as you hold it, like bread that forgot to grow a spine. You take a bite. It's mild, pleasant, but alarmingly bland compared to the sour, earthy breads you've shared with your ancestors. It dissolves quickly on your tongue, leaving behind a simple sweetness and not much else. No complexity, no tang, no depth. Bread that tastes like the idea of bread rather than bread itself. A baker explains proudly that this new white flour makes digestion effortless. You resist the urge to laugh. Sure, it's easy to chew, easy to swallow, but inside your stomach this loaf breaks down too fast, like a visitor knocking twice before barging into your blood sugar. You look around the bakery. Children clutch warm loaves. Wealthy families buy stacks of pastries. Workers celebrate the affordability of mass-produced flour. Society is thrilled. You alone know the nutritional trapdoor forming beneath their feet. As the day stretches on, you watch the old stone mills close one by one, their grinding songs replaced by metallic whines, their mineral-rich flour replaced by sifted whiteness. And something aches inside you. Not nostalgia, exactly, but recognition. You've seen the journey from wild grains to sacred bread, to travel loaves, to seasonal doughs. You've watched bread evolve with humanity. But here, something is lost. The soul of the grain, the character of the loaf, the gut-friendly microbes and minerals, the slow-rise nutrition, all traded away for speed and aesthetics. You walk back toward the steel mill one last time. The wheel churns, the gears grind, the rollers flash. This is progress, and yet, somehow, it's also the beginning of a subtle unraveling. Bread becomes lighter, softer, cheaper, and humans begin to wonder why they no longer feel as nourished as their ancestors. You brush flour from your clothes, a soft, pale dust that leaves no scent, no grit, no story. Your journey continues. You walk out of the steel mill's shadow expecting fresh air, but instead you're greeted by a strange, sharp scent. Faintly chemical, oddly sweet, undeniably modern. You blink. The world around you has shifted again. Gone are the wooden beams and water wheels. Now you're in the early industrial age, where factories rise like metal giants, and human hunger meets human invention in ways your ancestors could never have imagined. You follow the smell to a bustling bakery workshop, but this one doesn't feel like the cozy hearths you grew used to. Workers in aprons hurry between shelves, scooping powders from sacks with labels you've never seen in ancient kitchens. The bread here looks familiar, soft, pillowy, cleanly shaped. But something is off. It's too perfect, too uniform, like it was designed in a laboratory rather than nurtured by time. A baker waves you over. New additives, he might be saying proudly, if you could hear anything over the hiss of steam and clatter of pans. He shows you a small tin filled with fine white crystals. You sniff the air above it and instantly regret having nostrils. Baking powder? No, something more potent. A chemical preservative with a name so long it sounds like a password. Your gut mutters, Mayday. A mainstream historical fact surfaces with impeccable timing. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, bakers began adding preservatives, like calcium propionate, to keep bread from moulding as quickly. It extended shelf life dramatically. Great for sales, less great for your digestive system. You watch as the baker sprinkles the powder into a mixing bowl, stirring it with enthusiastic confidence. Keeps bread fresh for days, he beams. You raise an eyebrow. Freshness, you think, shouldn't smell faintly like a science fair. But it doesn't stop there. Workers pour in sugar, more than your ancestors would have used in a month, then shortening, then bleached flour, then something called a dough conditioner, which sounds like a hair product but is definitely not. You lean closer to the bowl and whisper, blink twice if you need help, but the dough just jiggles unbothered. A quirky tidbit glides into your memory. Some early bread factories experimented with aluminum salts to whiten bread unnaturally. Imagine your ancestors watching someone add metal powder to their dough. They'd assume humanity had fallen to dark sorcery, or that someone had deeply misunderstood the purpose of mining. While you're processing this, a worker scoops the dough into large trays, pushes them under a metal hood, and, wait, is that gas? Yes, they're piping gas into the chamber to accelerate fermentation unnaturally fast. What once took hours or days now happens in minutes. You can almost hear your sourdough starter ancestors screaming across time. The loaves come out fluffy, soft, beautiful, and your instinct says, suspicious. Historians still argue whether these early additives were technological triumphs or nutritional setbacks. Watching it unfold, you see the compromise clearly. Bread lasts longer, costs less, rises faster, and spoils later. But it's missing something. Something your ancestors trusted. Something invisible but essential. You follow a delivery cart outside where rows of identical white loaves are stacked like bricks. A vendor hands you one. You squeeze it. Your fingers sink in effortlessly. No resistance, no chew, no soul. You take a bite anyway. You're brave like that. It's soft, sweet, squishy, familiar. It melts on your tongue, but too fast, too empty. The bread doesn't feel like nourishment. It feels like edible scaffolding. You walk through streets lined with new shops, all boasting fresh bread, made with the same handful of modern additives. Housewives celebrate. Factories cheer. Bakers embrace the convenience. The world loves this new bread. Cheap, reliable, long-lasting. Your gut does not. It tightens a little. Not dramatically, this isn't horror cinema, but enough to make you realize something. Bread that never molds is bread that microbes don't want. And if microbes don't want it, your microbiome might file a complaint too. Yet you can't deny the brilliance behind the innovation. Less food waste, more availability, cheaper masses feeding millions. It's progress, wrapped in plastic and lightly scented with odd chemicals. A factory worker shows you a ledger where they track reduced spoilage. Less lost bread, his enthusiastic gestures seem to say. You nod. But you glance around and see something else. People are eating more bread now because it's everywhere. Larger portions, more refined flour, more additives, less fiber, less fermentation, less connection to the land, the seasons, the microbes that shaped your ancestors' guts. As you move through the city, you pass a small street cart selling older-style sourdough. A woman slices into the loaf, Steam escapes. The crust crackles. The smell hits you like a memory from sections ago. Deep, tangy, alive. You buy a small piece. The flavor is complex, layered, wild. Your tongue wakes up. Your stomach sighs like it's been returned to its homeland. Then you take a bite of the preservative loaf again, and taste nothing. The contrast is startling. The world around you may celebrate the convenience of chemically supported bread, but you've seen the ancient path. You've seen the nutrient-rich loaves, the long rises, the microbial symphonies, the rugged strength of bread that meant survival. Now you're watching the era where bread becomes shelf-stable, mass-produced, chemically assisted, and quietly weakened. Humanity is winning convenience, and slowly losing its super bread. You take a deep breath, letting the scent of industrial yeast and preservatives drift past you as you step forward. Your journey continues toward even stranger loaves. The factory haze drifts away like steam, and as you step forward, the world sharpens into a new kind of order. Cleaner lines, louder machines, predictable rhythms repeating like clockwork. You've walked into the era where bread stops, being an art, a ritual, a survival tool, and becomes a product, a brand, a symbol of modern convenience sealed neatly in plastic. The first thing you notice? The sameness. Rows and rows of identical loaves move along conveyor belts, each one a clone of the loaf before it. Perfect edges, perfect height, perfect colour, perfect softness, as if the bread has undergone military training in uniformity. You watch, mesmerised and slightly unnerved, as hundreds of loaves glide past workers who barely touch them. Machines weigh, shape, slice, and wrap. The air smells yeasty, warm and faintly metallic from the machinery doing 90% of the work. This is industrial bread standardization. A mainstream historical fact settles quietly into your thoughts. By the mid-20th century, mass-produced factory bread became the dominant form of bread across much of the world. Everything from slice thickness to crust color was standardized to meet consumer expectations and maximize production efficiency. Bread became predictable, and predictability sells. A manager beams proudly as he shows you a chart illustrating the consistency in loaf measurements. Every slice exactly the same, he gestures. He holds up a packaged loaf, its crust pale, its interior cotton soft. You squeeze it gently. It springs back like a memory foam pillow made of flour. Someone hands you a slice. You hold it between two fingers and marvel. No crumbs, none. A miracle of engineering or a culinary red flag. Your ancestors would tilt their heads like confused dogs if they saw this. You take a bite. The flavor is faint, mild, friendly, the bread equivalent of small talk. Nothing wrong with it, but nothing remarkable either. Then you notice the ingredient list on the package. It stretches longer than a medieval saga. Dough conditioners, stabilizers, color enhancers, emulsifiers, preservatives, added vitamins to replace the natural ones stripped during milling. Everything is standardized, even the nutrients. Historians still argue whether this shift was a triumph of food science or a nutritional setback disguised as progress. Watching the conveyor belt loop endlessly, you feel the answer tugging at you. Bread gained reliability but lost character. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Some early industrial bakeries ran tests with air pressure chambers to ensure bread rose perfectly evenly. They were essentially stress testing their loaves like astronauts. Because nothing says progress like panic-proof bread. You wander deeper into the facility, and your shoes stick faintly to the floor. Sugar residue. Yes, sugar. Soft, fluffy bread often hides sweeteners to improve texture and boost browning. You shake your head slightly. Ancient bread would laugh at this loaf, then challenge it to a duel. A worker cuts a fresh loaf in half for quality inspection. The inside is nearly fluorescent with whiteness. Uniform pores, precise texture. Everything designed to feel effortless. But then you see something that makes your heart sink just a bit. A bin filled with rejected loaves. They aren't bad. They just don't match the exact height or shape required. Too round, out. Too tall, out. Too dark, out. Bread is no longer valued for nourishment or flavor. It's valued for compliance. You step outside for air and something catches your attention. Kids walking home from school, each holding a lunch wrapped in paper. You know what's inside. Peanut butter sandwiches, bologna sandwiches, grilled cheese, soft bread hugging everything like a bland but dependable cloud. Industrial bread shaped not only diets but childhoods, culture, memories, the emotional fabric of the 20th century, and yet, it also shaped digestion. Your gut, by now an informed traveller, whispers a concern. Rapid digestion, blood sugar spikes, vanishing fibre, missing microbes. Modern bread rushes through your system like it's late for a meeting. You stroll through a grocery store where the bread aisle stretches endlessly. Plastic bags shine under fluorescent lights. Labels promise softness, lightness, affordability, freshness that lasts impossibly long. You pick up a loaf and read best buy dates that extend far into the future. Bread shouldn't have that kind of confidence. Ancient loaves grew mold because they were alive. These loaves persist because they're protected. Too protected. But there's another side to this story. You notice a worker stocking shelves with specialty breads, whole grains, sprouted grains, artisan sourdoughs, rye loaves baked in small batches. These breads are more expensive, tucked away like rare artifacts. A subtle rebellion against standardization. A quiet reminder of what bread once was. You take a modern industrial slice in one hand and a rustic artisan slice in the other. One is soft as a pillow. The other is firm, fragrant, alive with texture and scent. You close your eyes and imagine bringing these slices back to your earliest ancestors. The industrial one would confuse them. The artisan one would make them nod approvingly, maybe even tear up a little. You take a bite from each slice, industrial first, it's fine. Background noise, a filler, then the artisan slice. It tastes like memory. You breathe deeply, letting the contrast settle. Industrial bread fed nations. But ancient bread fed humans. The machines hum behind you as you continue walking, stepping into the next era of this long, complicated relationship between humans and their loaves. The hum of conveyor belts fades, and when you open your eyes again, you're standing in a vast golden field, waves of wheat stretching so far they seem to brush the horizon. The wind sighs through the stalks, whispering something ancient, but also something unnervingly modern. Because this wheat, it's not the incorn, emmer, or wild grasses your ancestors once relied on. This is modern wheat, tall, uniform, engineered for yield, not nourishment. You reach out to touch a stalk. It feels familiar, like every wheat image you've seen on cereal boxes, but your gut, now a seasoned historian of earthly grains, tilts its head suspiciously. A farmer waves at you from across the field. He's carrying something unusual, a bundle of wheat varieties tied together for demonstration. As he spreads them out, you see the truth laid bare. Ancient wheats are short, compact, golden brown, fragile in a beautiful way. Modern wheat, by contrast, stands tall and rigid, bred to resist storms, produce higher yields, and respond to fertilizers with explosive growth. A mainstream historical fact floats forward. In the 20th century, especially during the Green Revolution, wheat underwent dramatic genetic selection. Breeders prioritized traits like shorter stalks to prevent collapse, high gluten strength for machine kneading, and increased yield per acre. All good for feeding billions. Not always great for your digestion. The farmer hands you a kernel from the modern stalk. You crush it between your fingers. It's hard, harder than the incorn kernels you crushed with your ancestors. Stronger gluten, more protein, denser energy, designed for industrial baking and global distribution. You murmur, so this is the great wheat swap. Your ancestors, those who lived through the stone mill era, would be baffled by how different wheat has become. But you're not here to judge, you're here to understand. The farmer leads you to a shaded table where he's laid out a comparison. On the left, ancient grains with their delicate structures. On the right, modern wheat strands that stretch like miniature bungee cords. You pull on a strand of gluten from the modern dough sample. It stretches and stretches until you start laughing. Okay, that's ridiculous. This dough is practically auditioning for a superhero movie. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some early wheat hybrids were so resilient that farmers joked they survived everything except being eaten by goats. Even goats, nature's garbage disposal units, struggled. But beneath the humour, something deeper sits heavy. Modern wheat wasn't designed for the human gut of the past. It was designed for the bread machines of the present. Strong gluten is great for industrial loaf height, less great for people whose guts evolved on slow-fermented lower gluten grains. As you chew on a small piece of ancient einkorn bread left on the table for sampling, You notice how it breaks apart softly, tasting earthy and rich. Then you bite a sample made from modern wheat flour, airy, springy, chewy, in a noticeably different way. Historians still argue whether the rise in modern gluten sensitivities is due to changes in wheat genetics, environmental triggers, industrial processing, or gut microbiome shifts. But standing here, comparing kernels and loaves across millennia, you have a growing suspicion. The answer is all of the above. A tractor rolls by in the distance, spraying fertilizer. The scent hits you, sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Ancient grains didn't need these aggressive growth boosters. Modern wheat thrives on them, which affects soil health, grain composition, and ultimately what ends up inside your bread box. You walk further until you reach a small research shed. Inside, scientists in lab coats examine wheat samples under lights. One invites you over to show how selective breeding changed wheat structure, branching patterns, protein levels, enzyme behaviors. Everything is optimized for speed, volume, and uniformity. You glance at a chalkboard filled with diagrams. Words like semi-dwarf, high gluten, and yield stability leap out at you. You ask, through a raised eyebrow rather than words, but what about the humans eating it? The scientist shrugs with a gentle smile as if to say, someone else's department. Outside, you sit in the field, letting wheat sway around you. The sun warms your skin. A breeze lifts loose hulls into the air. You pick up a handful of kernels, modern ones clicking like little stones, ancient ones soft like seeds that remember the wild. You close your eyes and imagine your ancestors standing here beside you, comparing grains with their calloused fingers. They'd recognize the plant family, but not the plant. They'd sense the loss of diversity, the narrowing of flavor and nutrients, the way wheat has been reshaped to serve industry before individuals. And yet, they'd also see the miracle: more food for more people, fewer crop failures, abundant harvests breaking cycles of famine. This is the great paradox. Modern wheat feeds nations while confusing guts shaped by thousands of years of slower, gentler grain. You brush the kernels from your hands, feeling their weight fall away. Your journey moves forward, not toward the field, but toward what happens inside you when this wheat finally reaches your plate. You don't remember moving, but suddenly the field dissolves, and you're in a new landscape. Still, quiet, strangely intimate. No factories, no armies, no bustling villages, just you and your gut, which, by now, is practically a character in its own right. You place a hand on your stomach as if greeting an old travel companion. After everything you've seen, the superbreads, the slow rises, the stone-milled grains, the sacred loaves, you finally understand what your ancestors were feeding, not just themselves, but the tiny microbial universe inside them. And now, you're about to witness what modern bread has done to that universe. You feel a low rumble, not the embarrassing kind, thankfully, but something deeper, like your body is preparing to reveal old secrets. The world around you shifts, transforming into a softly glowing tunnel. You blink twice. You're standing inside a gigantic gut, your gut. The walls pulse gently, covered in intricate living patterns. Thousands of microbes, bacteria, yeasts, fungi, sparkle like tiny constellations surrounding you. It's beautiful, surreal, and slightly unsettling. You step carefully, not wanting to accidentally offend a lactobacillus by stepping on its metaphorical toes. A mainstream fact echoes through the tunnel. The human gut microbiome contains trillions of microorganisms that help digest food, synthesize nutrients, regulate the immune system, and even influence mood. These microbes evolved alongside ancient diets rich in fiber, resistant starches, and fermented foods. Your ancestors fed them well. Modern bread, not so much. You look around. Some microbial clusters glow warmly, thriving communities shaped by ancient-style bread you recently ate. But elsewhere, dim patches, sparse populations, areas that look like abandoned neighborhoods. Your gut gestures around wordlessly like, "See what I'm working with." You walk deeper. When you pass a cluster of Lactospiraceae, they perk up excitedly, sensing the long-fermented breads you sampled earlier. Their glow intensifies. They love slow-rise carbs. Fermented doughs feed them beautifully. You smile. At least someone's happy. Then you step toward a darker section, and the mood shifts instantly. Here, microbes seem stressed. overworked, underfed. The walls feel tighter, more irritated. You sense turbulence in the ecosystem, and you realize this is where modern, fast-risen, fine-flour, low-fiber bread tends to land. A quirky tidbit pops into your head. Scientists discovered that gut microbes can shout chemically when stressed, sending inflammatory signals throughout the body. Ancient bread rarely triggered this meltdown. Industrial bread. Sometimes it throws a mini rave your immune system never asked to attend. You move carefully through the dim zone, watching microbes scramble every time a soft white loaf appears in the distance like an incoming meteor. They break it down fast, too fast, releasing sugars in sudden bursts that crash through the gut wall like fireworks. Your bloodstream catches them and rockets them into circulation. You can almost hear your pancreas sigh. Historians still argue whether changes in bread digestion stem mainly from wheat genetics, chemical additives, refined flour, or microbiome disruption. But standing here inside your own digestive universe, you see the answer unfold in real time. Modern bread races through the gut. Ancient bread settled in, unpacked a suitcase, made friends with everyone. You reach a chamber glowing faintly green. Resistant starch used to gather, here in ancient times, feeding beneficial microbes like bifidobacteria. But modern bread, stripped of bran and germ, leaves almost nothing behind. The chamber is sparse, echoing. You whisper, "Sorry guys," out of instinct. A microbe waves weakly. You move on, arriving at a new zone, where ancient sourdough magic lingers. The walls look healthier. Microbial clusters dance gently, producing short-chain fatty acids like butyrate that calm inflammation and nourish colon cells. This region hums like a spa with complementary gut massages. You smile. These microbes remember your ancestors' bread with gratitude. But then the tunnel shakes. Something arrives fast. Too fast. A slice of modern white bread rockets into the system. The microbes brace for impact. The starch dissolves almost instantly. Blood sugar surges. Insulin jumps into action. The ecosystem momentarily panics, then tries to recover. Some microbes groan dramatically. Others shrug. "We didn't evolve for this pace, friend." Your gut turns to you with a glare that says, "Do you see my life now?" You nod solemnly. You've witnessed the fallout firsthand. Ancient bread took its time, digesting slowly, nourishing microbes layer by layer, providing fiber, minerals, fermentation byproducts, and structure. It formed relationships inside you. Modern bread rushes through like a tourist on a 30-minute layover. You continue walking until you reach a glowing central chamber, the microbiome control hub, if you will. Here, countless species swirl in patterns that reflect your overall gut health. Some shine brightly, others flicker like tired light bulbs. A few wave banners reading "Feed us better carbs." At the center floats an enormous bubble showing a montage of all the breads you've eaten across this journey. Ancient loaves make the bubble glow warmly. Modern slices make it tremble slightly. You reach out and touch the bubble. Images ripple, your ancestors grinding stone, fermentation bubbling naturally, sacred bread rituals, travel loaves fueling armies, seasonal medieval breads, stone dust adding minerals. Then, roller mills, bleached flour, preservatives, standardization, wheat designed for machines more than humans. Your microbiome watches you, waiting for you to connect the dots, and you do. The gut isn't angry at modern bread. It's confused, overwhelmed, underfed. It's trying to survive in a world where bread isn't allowed enough time, enough fiber, enough fermentation, enough wild microbial diversity. Ancient bread wasn't just easier to digest. It trained the gut, strengthened it, partnered with it. Modern bread. It often ghosts the gut after a brief dramatic encounter. You place your hand on the glowing wall of your intestinal tunnel. The microbes gather around, shimmering softly. You murmur, "I hear you now." And as the gut slowly fades around you, returning to its quiet biological hum, you step forward into the next chapter with a deeper understanding of what bread used to be and what your body quietly wishes it still was. The glowing microbial universe dissolves, and suddenly you find yourself sitting at a small wooden table. Nothing fancy, just a worn surface, a dim light, and a single plate waiting for you. On it sit 2 slices of bread, one ancient, one modern. They look innocent enough, but you can already sense your pancreas nervously pacing somewhere off stage. As soon as you touch the modern slice, the scene around you shifts. The table elongates into a track, long, polished, stretching into the distance like a retro arcade game. Your slice of modern bread hops onto the track, raises imaginary sunglasses, and launches forward like it just drank 3 energy drinks. You blink. Okay, calm down. But modern bread does not calm down. It zooms down the bloodstream racetrack with alarming speed. You watch glucose molecules burst off its surface like confetti cannons firing straight into circulation. Your blood sugar spikes instantly, sending a ripple of frantic activity through your internal landscape. A mainstream historical fact clicks into place. Fine, white, highly processed flour from modern bread breaks down so quickly that it causes rapid rises in blood glucose, followed by equally rapid insulin releases. Ancient grains, with their fiber and structure intact, trickled glucose into the bloodstream slowly, giving your body time to handle it. But modern bread, it's in a relationship with speed, a toxic one. A small exasperated insulin molecule wearing a tiny construction hat runs past you waving its arms, shouting something like, "We're already at max capacity, tell the bread to slow down." You shrug helplessly. It's doing its best impression of a Formula One car. Then the ancient bread slice steps up to the track. No sunglasses, no energy drink, just confidence. Calm, steady confidence. It takes off at a gentle jog, more tortoise than hare. The glucose release is slow, measured. A few microbes cheer. Your pancreas sighs in relief. You chew a piece of the ancient slice in real time to compare. It's hearty, chewy, complex, and your energy rises gradually, warm and steady, like a lantern being lit instead of a firecracker exploding. Meanwhile, the modern slice slams into a hairpin turn so fast it nearly wipes out. You can practically hear your body go, "Really? This again?" Historians still argue whether these drastic changes in glycemic response emerge primarily from milling practices, wheat genetics, missing fiber, or chemical additives. But watching this glucose Grand Prix unfold, you see all the culprits clearly, working together like mischief-loving teammates. You step onto the track yourself, watching the modern slice as it hits the sugar spike peak. The surrounding scenery literally glows brighter, your brain interpreting this as sudden energy. But the brightness flickers, you sense the coming crash, and the crash comes hard. The modern slice skids to a halt, glucose dropping so suddenly the racetrack dims like someone turned the lights off mid-sentence. Your imaginary insulin foreman groans, tossing his helmet aside with melodramatic flair. Then comes the fatigue, the dip, the hunger, the craving for more bread to restart the cycle. It's a roller coaster you didn't buy a ticket for. Meanwhile, the ancient slice just keeps jogging peacefully. No drama, no chaos, no sudden emotional eating. It learned long ago that slow and steady doesn't just win the race, it avoids the metabolic meltdown entirely. You sit cross-legged on the racetrack, peeling back the story behind what you're witnessing. Ancient bread, with its bran, germ, fiber, fermentation byproducts, and slower gluten structure, produced a steady energy curve, like a gentle hill. Modern bread, stripped of everything but the starch, creates a jagged peak, like a mountain formed overnight. A quirky tidbit dances onto the track. Some medieval documents describe bread as giving long strength, a poetic way of saying sustained energy. If those scribes tasted today's bread in a bag, they'd probably call it the bread of short enthusiasm. Around you, your internal team is recovering. Insulin wipes sweat from its forehead. Microbes take sips of metaphorical electrolytes. A few glucose molecules high-five each other for surviving the chaos. You glance at the modern slice. It looks harmless now, cozy even. But you've seen its alter ego, the sugar rocket that blasts off without warning. Suddenly the scenery shifts again. Now you're in a modern kitchen. A toaster pops. 2 slices emerge. Soft, uniform, lightly golden. You watch your own hands reach for them out of habit. Bread is emotional. Bread is cultural. Bread is comfort. But your journey has shown you the truth behind the comfort. The difference between steady warmth and a metabolic fire drill. You take a deep breath and break off a piece of the ancient-style slice. Its texture grounds you instantly. Your energy rises softly, quietly. No spike, no race, just nourishment. You realize something quietly profound. Your ancestors weren't trying to make slow carbs. They weren't thinking about glycemic indexes. They weren't calculating insulin response curves. They simply made the bread their bodies and their guts knew how to handle. And somewhere across history's conveyor belt, bread stopped being a partner and became a sprinter. You look down the racetrack one more time and see it fading, dissolving as the world prepares to teach you yet another chapter of the bread story. The blood sugar roller coaster dims behind you, and you step forward, curious, grounded, ready. You barely take a step before the racetrack melts away beneath your feet, replaced by a long fluorescent lit supermarket aisle. So bright it feels like someone turned the saturation up on reality. Everything is shiny, everything is packaged, everything is promising something, and you can already sense your gut folding its metaphorical arms, muttering, "Here we go again." Because this aisle is where the additive spiral begins. Row after row of neatly wrapped loaves stare back at you. Shelf-stable buns, ultra-soft sandwich bread, rolls with expiration dates so optimistic they practically wink at you. If ancient bread was a living companion, these loaves feel like engineered athletes designed for one purpose: survival on a shelf. You lift a bag, it squishes like a plush toy. Cute, but unsettling. You flip it over to read the ingredients. This is where the quiet horror sets in. A mainstream historical fact echoes in your mind. By the mid-20th century, bread companies began adding emulsifiers, conditioners, oxidizing agents, and preservatives to create softer textures, longer shelf lives, and faster production times. These weren't small tweaks. They fundamentally changed how the dough behaved and how your body reacted. Emulsifiers like datem and mono and diglycerides make bread softer and fluffier, but can also disrupt your gut lining, confusing your microbes. Dough conditioners like azodicarbonamide, yes, the yoga mat chemical, strengthens gluten but can irritate digestion. Oxidizers bleach flour for that perfect snowy whiteness, but strip away micronutrients. You stare at the ingredient list like you're reading a cosmic prophecy. Then you whisper, "Where is the bread part?" Your ancestors, watching from some cosmic balcony, simply faint. You continue down the aisle, picking up different loaves, scanning labels with growing disbelief. Some ingredients sound like minor Marvel villains. Others sound like a chemistry quiz. Very few sound like food. And the more you read, the more you feel it. The additive spiral wasn't one choice. It was a sequence of choices, each one compensating for a previous shortcut. Refine the flour, add vitamins back, speed up fermentation, add conditioners, remove the germ, add stabilizers to make up for lost structure, make the dough too weak, add gluten boosters, make the bread too soft, add emulsifiers, make it too shelf-stable, add preservatives. It's a cycle worthy of a daytime soap opera. A quirky tidbit pops into your head. Early bread scientists, yes, that was a job, once experimented with whipped air infusion to make loaves appear bigger with less dough. Literally selling you bubbles. If your ancestors saw this, they'd assume humanity was trolling itself. As you walk, the aisle warps around you. The shelves blur into conveyor belts. The bags of bread begin to stack themselves into towers. Structures built of preservatives and fluff. Lights flicker. The hum of supermarket. Refrigeration deepens into something more ominous. And in a blink, you're no longer in the store. You're inside the dough factory again, but now you can see the additives as glowing particles swirling into the mixing bowl. Emulsifiers slide in like charmers, coating gluten strands so they slip and stretch. Conditioners march in like drill sergeants, forcing the proteins into perfect formation. Preservatives hover like shields, pushing away bacteria that dare approach. You watch the dough transform from sticky paste into a smooth, obedient, factory-friendly substance. It's impressive, it's efficient, it's the baking equivalent of a corporate power team, and yet your gut, now a recurring emotional support character, shakes its head slowly. "Look," it says without speaking, pointing at a loaf rising impossibly fast. "I cannot keep up with that." Historians still argue whether additives are inherently harmful or simply misunderstood tools. But watching them dance into the dough, doing the jobs that wild microbes once did slowly and naturally, you sense the imbalance. Additives don't nourish you. They modify the bread, not to support your health, but to support production goals. You reach out to touch a finished loaf. It springs back instantly, impossibly, like memory foam crossed with optimism. You slice it open. The inside is soft, so soft it barely offers resistance. The texture is almost spongy, uniform, predictable, comforting, yes, but hollow in a way your tongue can't quite articulate. You take a bite. The flavor is mild, sweetened, pleasant in a commercial sort of way. But your body doesn't sigh with relief like it did after ancient bread. There's no grounding, no complexity, no microbial partnership, just efficiency. You chew more slowly, realizing something subtle but crucial. Each additive replaced a natural process your body used to rely on. Fermentation, mineral content, fiber texture, microbial collaboration, and each replacement nudged your gut a little further away from equilibrium. You swallow, tilt your head back, and look at the ceiling of the factory. Lights glaring, machines pounding, everything polished into submission. Then you imagine your ancestors kneading dough by firelight, letting time, stones, and nature do the work. Bread used to evolve alongside humans. Now humans keep adjusting themselves to tolerate bread. You set the loaf down gently, almost apologetically, as if breaking up with it. You step forward, deeper into the story, deeper into history's carbohydrate labyrinth. The additive spiral fades behind you like a dream that lasted decades. Ahead, a return to something ancient, something microbial, something alive. The fluorescent hum of industrial bread fades, softening into something warmer, older, almost musical. When your surroundings finally settle, you find yourself standing in a quiet kitchen lit only by late afternoon sun. Wooden shelves, clay jars, woven baskets, a single bowl on a table covered by a linen cloth that rises ever so slightly, breathing like something alive is waiting underneath. And then you smell it. Sourdough. Real sourdough. Not the sourdough-flavoured imposter modern bakeries sometimes sell, but the ancient kind, fermented slowly, crafted with patience and wild microbes, the same way your ancestors did it thousands of years before steel mills and preservatives barged into the bread world. You lift the cloth. The starter beneath bubbles gently, stretching into soft peaks. It smells tangy, warm, almost fruity. This is bread as biology, bread as heritage, bread as a living relationship with the invisible world. You smile instinctively. A baker enters. No machine noise, no additives, no conveyor belts, just calm, steady footsteps. She nods at you, hands dusted with flour, and gestures toward the bowl as if to say, "You remember this place. You've been here before." And you have. Versions of this kitchen existed in every era before industrialization. This is where fermentation wasn't a trend, it was survival. A mainstream historical fact rises in your mind. For most of human history, bread was fermented with wild yeasts and bacteria, primarily lactobacillus species. These microbes broke down gluten, neutralized phytic acid, lowered glycemic impact, and produced vitamins that industrial bread cannot replicate. Your gut perks up in the distance like, yes, this one, feed me this one. The baker hands you a jar of starter. You swirl it gently and watch tiny bubbles gather at the surface. It looks like microscopic champagne, alive, responsive, familiar. This is your ancient microbial team saying, "We've been waiting for you, bestie." You add a scoop of flour and water, stirring carefully. The starter eats it instantly. You can hear a faint fizz. You laugh. This thing is hungrier than I am. A quirky tidbit pops in. Some sourdough starters are older than entire countries. There are starters passed down through families for over 200 years, and a few commercial starters claim lineages of 500 plus years. Imagine eating bread from the same microbial family your great-great-great-grandparents fed. It's like owning a pet that outlives dynasties. The baker guides you through mixing the dough. You pour in water, add flour, sprinkle salt. Then the fun part, stretch and fold. The dough feels cool and elastic, not forced, not rushed. The gluten forms naturally, not under chemical pressure, but under your hands and the patient work of fermentation. You fold, rest, fold again. Each time, the dough strengthens. A quiet miracle. Historians still argue whether sourdough originated independently across cultures or diffused from early civilization hubs. But everyone agrees the technique was universal because the microbes were universal. Wild yeast live on grain, on hands, in the air. Humans didn't invent sourdough. They discovered they'd been living inside a world already, ready to help them bake. You carry the dough to a warm corner and let it rest. Hours pass, maybe more. You don't check a clock. You watch the dough rise slowly, confidently. It domes like a full moon. It smells sharper now, acids forming complex flavors that no shortcut can mimic. This is where modern bread misses the point. The enzymes and acids in sourdough predigest the flour. They unlock nutrients, they shorten gluten strands. They soothe the gut instead of startling it. They lower the glycemic spike that modern white bread launches like a carnival ride. Your dough is ready. You flip it onto a floured board, shape it into a tight ball, and gently score the surface with a blade. Each cut is a signature, a story. Ancient bakers marked loaves for ownership, ritual, or aesthetic. You mark yours with a simple curve, and the baker smiles approvingly. Into the oven it goes. The kitchen fills with warmth. The smell deepens, expands, wraps around you like a weighted blanket for the soul. Crust begins to form, thick, blistered, caramelized. Steam escapes through the scoring you made, opening the loaf like a flower blooming under firelight. When the baker finally removes it, the loaf crackles audibly, a sound bakers call the song. A living loaf singing as it cools. You slice it open. Steam rolls out, rich with acids and wild yeast. The crumb is airy, glossy, irregular, a map of fermentation tunnels. You take a bite. It tastes ancient, alive, grounded, tangy in a way that flicks on 1,000 ancestral memories. Your gut practically cries tears of joy. You feel warm energy, not the spike and crash chaos of modern bread, but a steady glow that spreads gently through your limbs. In that moment you understand what you've been chasing through all these centuries. Bread wasn't supposed to be fast. Bread wasn't supposed to be sterile. Bread wasn't supposed to be a product. Bread was supposed to be alive. Sourdough wasn't an invention. It was an agreement between humans and microbes, an ancient handshake that nourished both. The baker sets her hand on the loaf, nodding once more. You're ready, she seems to say, because the next part of your journey is about rediscovering the grains that once made this ritual effortless. The warm sourdough kitchen softens around you like a dream dissolving, and when you open your eyes again, you're standing in a different kind of warmth. Sun spilling across a wide-open field full of ancient stalks. Shorter, hardier, earthier, wheat that looks like it remembers being wild. The wind brushes your face thick with the scent of old grain. Deep, nutty, slightly sweet. You inhale and feel your body recognize something it hasn't encountered in a long time. Einkorn, emmer, spelt, the ancestral grains. You walk forward and the ground crunches softly under your feet. The plants are shorter than modern wheat. Their heads heavier, their husks more protective. They don't shimmer uniformly like modern fields. They sway like a mosaic of personalities, each stalk shaped by untamed genetics rather than agricultural optimization. You reach down and pluck a head of einkorn between your fingers. It's small, compact, almost delicate. A mainstream historical fact rises in your mind. Einkorn is believed to be one of the first domesticated grains, cultivated over 10,000 years ago. It contains simpler gluten structures, richer micronutrients, and more antioxidants than most modern wheat. You rub the grain between your hands and feel the hull resist. This wheat makes you work for it, just as it made your ancestors work, and that effort shaped bodies, diets, and entire civilizations. Nearby, a farmer waves to you, beckoning you toward 3 baskets. Each holds a different ancient grain. You kneel beside them. Einkorn, golden, tiny, softly sweet. Emmer, longer grains, darker, earthier, the backbone of early bread. Spelt, nutty, chewy, full of fiber and character. You scoop a handful of spelt and notice how each grain feels alive, dense with something your body can't name but instantly respects. A quirky tidbit flickers through your mind. In parts of Europe, spelt was once believed to be a grain blessed by gods. People wrote spells and prayers onto spelt dough, convinced it carried protection. Imagine telling that to modern bread shaped like cartoon characters. The farmer gestures for you to follow him to a small stone mill. He pours the grains into the top and begins turning the crank. The sound, low, gritty, rhythmic, feels like a memory from another lifetime. Flour falls in soft cliffs speckled with bran and germ. It smells rich, nutty, almost buttery. You run your fingers through it, and feel tiny oils and flecks that modern white flour lost centuries ago. Historians still argue whether ancient grains are healthier because of their genetics, or because they remained untouched by industrial breeding. But as you inhale their aroma, you feel the truth settle in. These grains were meant for humans before humans were meant for machines. The farmer hands you a small bowl of freshly milled flour and leads you to a clay mixing dish. You pour in water, sprinkle salt, and stir with your hands. Immediately, the dough behaves differently from modern wheat. It's softer, less elastic, more cooperative. It doesn't stretch aggressively. It yields. Your gut whispers, "Oh, this is my language." You knead slowly and the dough thickens, becoming plush and slightly sticky. Emmer dough feels hearty. Spelt dough feels silky. Einkorn dough feels tender and humble. The farmer points to a sun-warmed spot where the dough can rest. No rush, no industrial yeast, just time, air, microbes drifting in like old friends. You settle next to the bowl, and within minutes the dough begins to puff, rising modestly but steadily. You smile. This bread doesn't aspire to skyscraper heights. It doesn't need to. Its power is in its substance, not its ego. As the dough rises, you notice something happening inside yourself too. Your breath slowing, shoulders loosening, digestion settling. Ancient grains calm you, feed you, anchor you. When the dough is ready, the farmer shapes it into small rounds and places them on a stone slab heated by a simple fire. Steam rises. The smell, deep, dark, primal, wraps around you until you feel like you're wrapped in the memory of every ancestor you've met along your journey. The first loaf comes out. You break it open. The crumb is dense but tender, moist but structured, flecked with bran and history. You take a bite and flavour floods your tongue. Nutty, earthy, mineral-rich. It tastes like soil in the best possible way, like the land, like honesty. Your gut sighs, a long grateful exhale that says, "Finally." This bread doesn't spike. It sustains. It doesn't bloat. It nourishes. It doesn't confuse. It collaborates. You close your eyes, and you understand why your ancestors thrived on this food, why their bodies grew strong, why their guts flourished, why their bread, rugged, humble, nutrient-dense, built civilizations one loaf at a time. You look at the farmer. He smiles as if he already knows what you're thinking. This is super bread. This was the bread, the one your body remembers. You take another bite, slow and deliberate, because the next step of your journey isn't just about looking back. It's about learning how to bring all this ancient wisdom forward into your modern kitchen. The ancient fields fade softly into dusk, and as you take your next step, you find yourself standing in a modern kitchen. Your kitchen, or at least a familiar version of it. Stainless steel appliances, overhead lighting, maybe a plant you keep forgetting to water. A cutting board sits on the counter. A bag of store-bought bread sits beside it, looking suddenly out of place, like a character who wandered in from the wrong movie. Tonight you're not travelling through time. Tonight you're testing your new knowledge, learning small, realistic ways to bring back the super bread your ancestors relied on, without needing a stone mill, a clay hearth, or 14 hours of free time. Your gut appears beside you metaphorically, arms crossed, giving a silent nod that says, "Okay, let's fix this." You start by opening your cupboard. Flour, yeast, salt. Simple ingredients, but you now understand the difference between merely having ingredients and respecting them. A mainstream historical fact echoes softly. Traditional bread making wasn't just about ingredients. It was about method, time, fermentation, whole grains, microbial partnership. Modern shortcuts stripped those pieces away, but you're about to reclaim them in practical, doable ways. You pull out a jar labeled whole wheat flour. It's a start, but you remember what you learned. Whole wheat is better than white, but ancient grains carry extra nutrients and easier digestion. So you set the whole wheat aside and reach instead for a small bag of spelt flour you bought once and forgot about. It feels like greeting an old friend. You pour the spelt flour into a bowl. Your hands remember the motion instinctively, mixing, scooping, leveling, adding warm water, salt, a bit of starter from the jar you've tentatively begun maintaining. You stir gently, feeling the dough come together with a softness modern wheat rarely offers. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Because ancient grains have gentler gluten networks, over-kneading them actually makes the dough worse. The dough wants kindness, not domination. You adjust your touch, kneading lightly. Your dough relaxes visibly. Even your shoulders relax as if mirroring it. Time to fold, rest, fold, rest. You're not rushing tonight. The dough rises slowly, steadily, like a breath drawn in peace instead of panic. Historians still argue whether modern baking convenience liberated people or disconnected them from nature. But as you watch your dough bloom gently under a cloth, you realize you're healing something inside yourself. Your relationship with food, maybe, or the way you treat time. You lift the cloth again. The dough has doubled, but not dramatically. It's modest, humble, grounded. You shape it with wet hands, lay it into a bowl lined with a towel and let it rest again. The house smells faintly like fermentation, warm and tangy. And then you notice something surprising. Your shoulders are lower, your breath deeper. You haven't checked your phone in half an hour. Bread isn't just feeding your gut, it's calming your nervous system. While the dough rests, you turn to the store-bought loaf on the counter. It stares back at you, fluffy and plastic-wrapped. You pick it up and give it a gentle squeeze. It squishes like a memory foam pillow. You sigh. Your gut gives it a side-eye, but you don't throw it away. You're not here to reject modern bread entirely. You're here to make peace with it and improve it where you can. You slice into the store loaf and toast a piece. Toasting, your ancestors whisper, reduces the glycemic impact. Crisp edges, slower breakdown. Small hack, big effect. Not super bread, but better. You spread butter on it. Real butter. Fermented cream. Your gut hums approvingly. Then you sprinkle a pinch of seeds, chia, flax, pumpkin, tiny nutrient bombs that compensate for the stripped-down flour. Another hack. Easy. Manageable. The toast tastes better. Still modern, but wearing a vintage jacket now. Your dough is ready for baking. You heat your oven with a heavy pot inside. When the pot is blazing hot, you transfer the dough into it. The steam hisses. The lid traps the moisture. Your kitchen fills with warmth and the scent of something older than metal and electricity. 20 minutes later, you lift the lid. The loaf has risen. Proudly. Crust blistered. Edges golden and crackling. A soft pop song of cooling. You slice it open. Steam curls upward. The crumb is gentle, irregular, alive. You tear a piece with your hands, smear a bit of butter over the warm interior and take a bite. It's everything you hoped. Earthy, toothsome, tangy, nourishing. You feel it settle calmly into your body. No spike, no stomach drama, no sugar roller coaster. Just warmth. You laugh softly. You made this. You, standing here in your modern kitchen, just bridged the gap between ancient super bread and modern life. You turn to the counter, where the store loaf sits modestly beside your new creation. You don't resent it. You simply understand it now. You know what it lacks. You know how to support your body around it when you choose it. You know how to supplement, slow its digestion, pair it with fats, proteins, and fiber. You now have options. You now have tools. And tonight, you've proven something important. You don't have to time travel to eat like your ancestors. You can bring them into your kitchen, one simple change at a time. You close your eyes, chew slowly, and imagine the next step. Integrating this knowledge into your daily life, your routines, your habits. Where bread becomes a partner again, not a sugar-loaded stranger. Where your gut feels understood. Where your loaf feels alive. Your journey is almost complete. Your kitchen settles into a quiet hum, the cooling loaf crackling softly beside you, like it's whispering centuries of wisdom into the air. The lights feel warmer now, gentler, as if even the electricity understands you've just bridged 10,000 years of bread making in one evening. You take a deep breath, still tasting the warmth of that fresh, ancient-style slice on your tongue. But your journey isn't done. Not yet. Because now you're about to step into the future. Your future. Our future. A future where bread can come full circle. The room begins to shimmer, and before you can blink, the walls ripple outward like ink blooming in water. The kitchen dissolves, reforming into a bright, airy workshop filled with tools both familiar and impossibly new. It looks like a fusion of a traditional bakery, a science lab, and a cozy home kitchen. Wooden benches meet sleek fermentation chambers, clay bowls sit beside digital temperature sensors, and everything smells like hope rising. You walk forward slowly, absorbing the atmosphere, the way old and new intertwine effortlessly. Because this is what bread becomes when wisdom leads innovation rather than replacing it. A baker engineer, you're not sure which word fits better, waves you over. On the counter sits a loaf that looks perfect. Not perfect like a factory clone. Perfect like a story well told. Dark crust, deep scoring, irregular crumb, a balance of artistry and science. This, the baker seems to say, is what happens when we remember where we came from. She slices into the loaf, releasing steam that smells like every ancestor you've met on this journey. You take a piece and hold it between your fingers. It feels substantial, confident, alive. Your gut leans forward like a kid watching a magician pull out a hat. A mainstream historical trend comes to mind. In the 21st century, a resurgence of artisan bread-making, ancient grains, and wild fermentation began. An instinctive return to practices nearly lost. People started to rediscover what slow, living bread offered: flavor, nutrition, stability, connection. But this future scene you're standing in isn't just revival, it's evolution. You watch someone pour a mixture of ancient grains, einkorn, emmer, millet, sorghum, into a stone grinder hooked to a quiet electric motor. Stone ground flour with modern efficiency, the best of both worlds. Another person adjusts a fermentation chamber, not to rush the dough, but to maintain the ancient patience of long-rise techniques, with precise temperature controls that honor the microbes rather than override them. You peek inside the chamber. The dough rises slowly, bubbles forming like constellations. It smells tangy and robust. Alive in every sense. A quirky tidbit flashes by. Some modern bakers are experimenting with heritage microbial cultures, starters infused with yeasts collected from forests, flowers, even ancient pottery shards. Bread with DNA older than countries, bread that feels like time travel in your mouth. Your gut hums happily as if already digesting the idea. You move deeper into the workshop and see a table lined with future loaves, high-fiber breads using sprouted grains, sourdough loaves, engineered for optimal gut microbiome synergy, breads fermented with probiotic-rich cultures, loaves that incorporate forgotten grains once abandoned by industrial farming, coloured loaves, textured loaves, wild scored loaves, bread that respects the past and adapts to the future. Historians still argue whether the future of bread will belong to biotechnology, regenerative agriculture, or cultural revival. But here, looking around, you realize the answer isn't one or the other. It's all of them. Bread's evolution isn't linear. It's cyclical. You watch someone demonstrate a clever hack, blending modern wheat with 20% ancient grains, adding a spoonful of long-fermented starter, letting the dough rest overnight. A simple, doable method for everyday people to reclaim 80% of the benefits of superbread without abandoning their normal lives. The baker hands you a slice of a different loaf, airy but sturdy, tangy but sweet, the kind of bread that feels like a handshake between old microbes and new technology. You take one bite and your whole body seems to exhale. It tastes like everything you've learned. The grit of stone mill flour, the tang of wild fermentation, the calm of long-rise dough, the warmth of ritual, the strength of ancient grains, the clarity of modern technique, and above all, balance. You swallow slowly, feeling your gut glow like the embers of a satisfied fire. Bread doesn't have to be the enemy. Bread doesn't have to be a problem. Bread doesn't have to be feared. Bread can nourish again. Bread can heal again. Bread can be super again. And not just for your ancestors, but for you. You stand in the center of this future bakery, letting the light settle around you. Everything feels grounded, possible, real. You take a slow breath, letting the scent of warm grain and gentle fermentation lull your senses. Your journey, 10,000 years of crumbs, crusts, microbes, stones, rituals, steam, sparks, and science, has brought you right back to your own hands, back to the kitchen where your loaf is cooling, back to the choice you make each day, back to the understanding that bread, when made with time and intention, becomes a partner again, a companion, a living food, a gift. You close your eyes, and the world begins to soften. Let everything around you grow quieter now. Let the bright edges of the world soften like a loaf cooling on a countertop after a long, gentle bake. You've travelled centuries tonight, moved through fireside villages and bustling empires, through the chambers of your own body and into a future where bread remembers who it used to be. And now you're here, safe, still, resting in the glow of everything you've learned. Take a slow breath in, feeling your chest rise like dough finding its shape, and a slow breath out, letting the air fall away easy and warm. Imagine the last loaf you touched, the one baked from ancient grains and patient hands. Imagine its weight in your palms, the warmth against your skin, the soft crackling song it whispers as it cools. Let that warmth spread through your fingers, your arms, your chest, all the way down to your stomach, where your microbiome feels calmer, steadier, understood. There's nothing you need to fix right now, nothing you need to decide, nothing you need to hold on to except this softness. Picture yourself placing that loaf gently on a wooden board. Picture the quiet room around you, a faint breeze carrying the scent of warm grain. Let your thoughts slow until they settle like flour drifting to the bottom of a bowl. You've learned so much tonight. You've seen how bread changes and how you can choose the breads that nourish you back. But all of that can wait for tomorrow. For now, feel your body grow heavier, sinking comfortably into rest. Feel your breath lengthen, smooth and unhurried. Feel the day melt away behind you. You are safe, you are warm, and you are ready to drift into sleep.